around what you think to.
Yeah.
But when I'm reading, I want to take lots of notes.
Quite like stuff.
Yeah.
Mm. Yep. Right.
Patient for getting search for I'm using a different PDF for this.
Philip, are you ready to go live now? It's 9:30.
Indeed. Right. Oh, I'm on screen. Oh, okay, thank you. Let's declare this Audit and Risk Committee meeting open. Thank you. Thank you.
Nai mai hara mai tātou, ki te hui nei, tēnei te karakia tīmatanga. Mai ingoe tātou, mai te pai maunga raro ki te tai, mai te awa tonga raro ki te awaraki. Tēnei te hāpori awhi ai e taratahi. Whano, whano, hara mai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you, Councillor. Welcome, Charlene from, hope you can see us. Can you hear us?
On mute.
She's on mute? She's not shaking your head? No. Frozen? All right, we'll just move on. All right, do we have any apologies? Thank you. Any conflicts of interest for the items on the agenda? Public forum? No. Report, confirmation of the previous minutes held 20th of May. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Ferry. Seconder. Thank you, Stefan. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. First item, COVID-19 update. Thank you.
Obviously, take the report as read, but just to preface, firstly, this is obviously an ongoing issue for us, and we are meeting. We met, senior management met daily last week, and we, with the level 2 announcement, we're refining it down to every second day. So while the report outlines the preparations that we have made, that obviously has been reviewed very frequently, almost hourly at some stage, probably. So just to confirm or let you know, or be reassured that our staff and our processes are well prepared. Particularly our staff feel very confident that they are prepared, which is quite important. Obviously there's been, I guess in terms of their well-being and themselves, a level of confidence from our staff that they feel comfortable and very prepared with what might happen. So we're really just waiting for any further announcements that come out about that. So happy to take any questions.
Questions? No, right.
I've just got one, Jerry, in your report on page 12, the bottom paragraph before considerations. I'm not quite sure whether it's, I don't understand, or it's another word in there. The council will be asked to have staff assigned to the EC, and then then we could only make staff available if the ECC and the EOC does not activate. Should that be does activate?
So if the ECC activates, so that situation may be or could be in the Wellington need for a response at that level. but
Okay.
not, we might have cases that we Wairarapa. So in Wairarapa, presumably the EOC, our local response, would activate. In which
Okay.
case we wouldn't have the numbers of staff or be able to move over to the ECC based in Wellington.
Yep.
The last time when we had our own case, we actually had staff ready to go into the ECC in Wellington, but because we had our own case, they weren't able to go
Okay.
either in terms of preventing any possible infection numbers that we have. So we prepared a roster. Large of those staff would have been in before. If our local EOC operates, they're ready to go. There are some staff on standby for the ECC if they activate that at that wider regional level rather than
Okay.
wider.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca.
So Daffodil Festival, what are we going to do about that if we stay at level 2?
So we are really on pause with our decision and pending the announcement on the 21st is our first marker really to see what that is. There's, you know, if we go back to level 1, then we can proceed as we had planned to originally. If we stay at level 2, depending on what the guidelines are going to be, so currently the numbers of gatherings under 100, that there might be a 1.5, so maybe level 1 looks different to what it does, what has done before, then maybe there's a cap on numbers. So really we're kind of in a full state where we have to see what the restrictions might be, and I don't know if Stephen has inside knowledge of anything like that, but you know, we're just sort of waiting at the moment. There's nothing we can not do between now and Friday, perhaps that will save us money or that we haven't done already. So we've made our plans. Making a decision today or Friday or Monday is not going to make a difference to us in terms of operational planning or expenditure at this stage.
I think what you said is fair. I think it's unlikely we'll go back to a level as we had it in a matter of weeks. Hopefully we'll get back there soon, but unlikely to be.
And so if we are at level 2, will we just cancel it, or will we try to do something slightly revised?
Because the limits are on 100 people maximum per event.
Yeah, I was thinking something like you could still do rolling daffodil picking or something.
Yeah, so we've all considered that sort of thing because we've done some preliminary thinking about that, the rolling so we thought, you know, could that look like just the daffodil picking, but that would require buses, it would require physical distancing, so that we then double the buses, we can't park out there so people can't drive.
So that would be also an added cost to council with no
Yes.
the buses
No
are
income.
expensive.
Whether there's an opportunity for, in terms of being a fundraiser for Plunkett, whether there's an opportunity for a number of people to pick and then sell daffodils. Yeah, so other options like that in terms of the fundraiser side of it, potentially.
It's hard to feel like that.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Tongue in cheek.
My other question was around the sick leave policy, introducing flexible unlimited sick leave. I was just wondering if you could explain that a little bit, and is that for a fixed period, like to COVID-19, or is it extended going forward?
So during the level 2, 3 and 4 periods, we had this arrangement with our team, just because we didn't want to have any barrier that would make them come to work if they felt they needed to be self-isolating or were unwell. So that was the initial start of that thinking. During those periods, we actually didn't experience much sick leave, or people definitely, no one abusing that opportunity or using it for other than what it was for. So following on from that, as we've come out, the management team have really been thinking about, is that something that we would continue as our normal course of business? So we've been talking to our teams about what that might look like, how that might work. It is commonplace in a number of government organisations, central government and other businesses, organisations as well. So we've been starting the conversations around that with our staff as to this is an opportunity. We've built a really high level of trust both ways in our staff and our management and our organisation to look after them. And we're sort of just working through those conversations. What are the potential fish hooks? What are the concerns they might have? So to date, it's been really well received by staff. We've got some staff who, in a traditional sense, have banked a lot of sick leave, you know, in the preparation that they might be unwell or they might have to use a significant amount. So there's some balancing in those.
Just a question on that sort of side question. I mean, I know there's a number of councils that have gone for unlimited sick leave. Have you actually, talked to them in terms of what their experience is in terms of?
We have put it out, they've had some responses from other councils. One that was adverse in terms of they felt where people were being performance managed, they started to use the sick leave as a way of avoiding that process.
Yeah.
We don't have an issue with performance management on a scale that would impact our team here.
Yeah.
Jane might be able to talk to that a bit more, but again, that fed into our reasoning of why we're well placed to be able to make this an opportunity for our staff. As far as the report goes, yeah, that's particularly for COVID, we've instigated that as at level 2, really just to give staff the opportunity if they are unwell and particularly staff in colds.
In my personal experience, I've worked with a couple of organisations that have had unlimited sick leave. Sick leave tends to be lower than where people think that actually they've got an entitlement to therefore they're incentivised to use it.
Yeah, that's my perception as well.
Yeah, in an office environment often ends up being lower. The risk is if someone gets some kind of long-term illness or something, that's where you need to find the policy. That's the complications or the risk on our side.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. Any other? Yeah, keep going.
Final question.
Oh, keep going.
And it's just around managing contractors, and I noted that you've written down that councils expecting contractors have a COVID-19 safety plan. Just wondering how it's monitored and just ensure that they aren't bringing sick people into work and that sort of thing as well.
Julie could probably speak to this a little bit there on the ground, but their expectation is they're monitoring that, is that we'll be monitoring their health and safety as far as our contracting oversight or supervision of them would be, so it would fall from our
Probably our biggest risk just in terms of our own people interacting with our contractors. Probably the Hogan team is probably the one because we share an office. We've had in writing their assurance from their management that they're actually absolutely onto it and they've got a plan in place and they're actively monitoring it. So I'm quite comfortable that that risk has been addressed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just a question. It's probably more of a long term because I think COVID's going to be around with us, but who knows how long, right? Probably 3 to 4 years. Easy. Sorry? Yeah. So to me, I think we probably need to start to think about a longer term strategy in terms of, because I'm not sure what's going to happen. Hopefully we won't be yo-yoing in and out of lockdowns, but there's going to be COVID floating around for a long time, and it's going to be interesting to see what the change in directions post-election. There might be a bit of a loosening up, not sure. So that's again something that needs to be considered, because I don't think New Zealand can keep going the way it's going with its very tight border. So there needs to be some changes to the border. I don't know how that's crystal ball gazing, but I think it would be useful just to start thinking about what's the longer term risks for council around COVID. It's sort of a bit of a think tank rather than a direct action. Questions, comments?
Just comment. I just want to acknowledge Jerry and your team for the work that you've done in leading us through this, and obviously with last Friday, I was able to see how the preparedness was when you were preparing to go to level 3 and everything. So having a plan and seeing an action like this is a good reflection on yourself and the other senior management. So thank you.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's, having that preparedness is important, right? In fact, what was interesting, when we talk about peer social media, I heard about a couple of texts saying, oh, we're going to level 3 because so-and-so and so-and-so said we're going to level 3. And I go, no, they've probably been told that they've got to prepare for level 3. Doesn't mean that you're actually going to level 3. So that's part of the communication. I think it's really important that we might be preparing for something. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually going there. I think that's really important, that we've got our plans in place should it happen, rather than, and that's really important, that we've got our plans should it happen. Hopefully we don't have to go to level 4 again.
Yeah, and certainly the messaging is good. There's not lots of messaging, it's just when it needs to be in. It's good.
Yeah.
Phil, just from Jerry, just in regards to events, utilising them. Is there an opportunity, if we are going to hang around level 2 for some period of time, is there an opportunity to do more intimate type of events?
Would you like to rephrase the question?
Yeah, largely
Numbers.
I guess the first thing is what does level 2 look like going forward in terms of numbers, and secondly, it's largely up to a lot of promoters to decide how they're going to run their event in accordance with those restrictions. We play a little bit in terms of the event centre as just the venue. We will ensure they follow those restrictions as well, but it's their call in terms of if they postpone or cancel or amend their numbers. So again, it's probably a little bit of a wait and see, but that could well be the longer term opportunity is to be promoting more smaller events.
So that Ben early one that was postponed, what was the numbers for that?
It was sold out, so we would have been around close to 300. Capacity is, yes.
Challenges. Any other questions of Jerry on the report? Therefore, can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 13? I'll move it. Second it. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. I think it's carried. Thank you, Jerry. Right. Audit New Zealand. So, pass the pass.
Yes, it is, yeah, that's an extended. So Audit New Zealand isn't here, so they won't be able to talk to their interim report. I've sent through to councillors and other committee members where's the draft management response. I've got hard copies here if everybody hasn't got them. So my apologies for lateness. We didn't get the interim report through till quite late as well, so we just really didn't have time to get those comments into the agenda version. Phoebe obviously isn't here anymore. Jeff can't make the meeting today for personal reasons, so it is me. I can answer probably quite a few of your questions if you've got them unless they're really technical. My view on the interim report is I'm pretty happy with it. The issues that they are identifying are pretty minor in my view. There are a couple of risk items in there. One of them does relate to the rating information database. This is an issue that they've been raising for the last 20 years with us. We've done everything that we think that we can to manage the risks with the RIT, and we don't believe that the risks are particularly high anyway in terms of an error being made on our database. So what we want you to do as a committee is just to consider whether the risks are actually acceptable from your perspective. My advice is that they are minor risks and we can't really do much more about them. We are obviously handicapped by being a small team. It is what it is, and I think that from my perspective, we do have the controls that actually we can have in place. That is in place, that we can have in place is in place now. I have got managers here, so if there's any questions around some of the management responses and the issues that have been raised in the interim report. But, we've got specific issues related to the evidence. So we'll try and answer that question.
So any specific questions? Just, I've got a couple I agree with, then I'll come back to the RID issue at the end. I think that's, I agree with where management are recommending. I just might just sort of change the recommendation. I think it's probably we just need a little bit more refinement there. But in terms of what would be good, Jane, next time if we could actually have where you think action is recommended, right, by audit, right? Whether, you know, do you actually have a work program to actually undertake that and update that to say, look,
So timing of
timing of the response, to say, look, yes, we've got that on our work program, but it really, realistically, we can't achieve it till 2022 because of X, Y, and Z, because, you know, it might relate to something that's, it's no point doing it now because it might relate to something in the future. I think that would be good.
So I can actually have got that for to when we finalise our management.
Yes, yes, that would be good. So just a clarification, so this response hasn't gone to audit yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
So we've got the opportunity.
Yes. Do you want to change anything? Or
change anything?
If you want to actually give us a signal on what you think the priorities are,
Yeah.
then I'm more than happy to take that.
Yeah, I think that's really, audit aren't here, but I've been around the block once or twice. I think it's really important that if the committee thinks that audit are going over the top on something and asking something to be done, and I think this is where we actually, the recommendation, we can change that recommendation and we acknowledge what the risks are, that we're prepared to accept that risk with certain controls being in place, and we actually ask that that goes in the response. Then audit will actually say, well, look, you've addressed it formally with us, it then comes off the management letter. If we don't do that, they will just keep on, it'll get like a stuck record and just coming around and around again. That's really important. So if there are issues in here that the committee don't think are important, that we acknowledge this, it's an issue, but we don't want to progress it any more than other than what the response accept management's response. If we disagree with management, that's another debate as well.
And regarding the RID issue, I think they need to suggest that themselves in that report that we do that.
Yes, they have, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Oh, don't get me started on that. No, I don't think. No, we'll wait till we get there. All right, just quickly, yeah.
So just on that topic though, so what do other councils do with that? Do they contract out some independent report of it or something?
No.
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 Okay. So what do they do?
Basically, what they do is they do their own reconciliations to make sure that the critical data does reconcile, and the minor data, they don't worry about it because the majority of it's done electronically, because they accept the risk.
Okay.
And the risk is minimal.
Oh, well, you know, and so since you brought up, I mean, the risk is, excuse me, Greg, I'll use your example again, right? But, you know, Greg might have a property worth $100,000, right? And that we actually might accidentally put that into the RID of only $10,000. Now, we would actually, the council, this is what I'm asking Jane to give clarification, that because of the reconciliations that they are doing, that would actually be picked up immediately. Okay, so that's probably the biggest risk for council, that there is a mismatch of the valuation data between what QV provides to us and what is in the system. Okay, so that's you know, so there are other processes similar to that that would actually enable that risk to be identified. Another potential risk is that, and I'll pick on the chief executive now, that we are misidentifying that a targeted rate on her property is missed off. So she actually misses that targeted rate. Now, when hopefully there is a reconciliation between what we expect our income, knowing the number of properties and the actual rate setting procedure, that we identify that we've got the right amount of income. So again, it's that sort of procedure that we've actually identified, well, what are the big issues that we're worried about in terms of accuracy of the RID? Do we actually have controls in place to mitigate those risks? The fact that they miss your keying in your address, so a letter would come back, we would then go back to our records and check that address, so that's a minor risk. So I think it's, and that's what I'm suggesting as part of the RID, that we actually just get that, and it's a risk assessment. Right? We accept that based on the information provided by management, that there is minimal risk, but we would just like, since Audit have raised it, we'd just like it next time, just that assessment to be done of what are the critical risks and how have they been actually managed to mitigate the risk as best in terms of the, our appetite for risk. Because you're right, we could actually go and spend, and it would be probably $20,000 to actually get an independent person, because we don't actually have the resources in-house to do it, to actually go through and do that validation. And it would have to be done every time there's an update to the RID, which happens on a monthly basis. Okay. So I think this is a little bit OTT in terms of their approach. I think there's somewhere has come up with this for local authorities. You happy with that, Jane?
Yeah, I think the other reality of a tiny little council like ours is our rates people, well, one person, they know the properties pretty well, and we do get to see stuff, and Wendy does get to notice things, even, you know, when we're generating the rate bills and so on. So it's, we've got that informal surveillance happening as well.
And I think actually that's actually a risk. A bigger risk for council is they've only got 1.5 people managing their entire rating process rather than the actual RID.
So they say that they've provided us some information on how we can address this. Do we know what that is?
I haven't got that in front of me. I mean, really, in the past when we've been talking about it, it's really something that I think the council could do, and we just can't do it within our existing resources. So, you know, I guess that one of the decisions of the committee, one of the recommendations that you might want to sort of have a think about is whether you want us to invest more in resources in this area. I wouldn't recommend it myself, but, you know, if you want to absolutely cover off the risk, we could employ enough people.
I think if we're going to do that, we need to do it across the whole spectrum in a lot of areas, isn't it? Because being small, there's no depth at all.
Yeah. And I think that's probably just that final closing of the loop. It's just to say, what are the key things that we're doing? What are audits suggesting and how unachievable they are? And then that would actually, I think, formally close the loop. And maybe you could actually put that in your response.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing, and this is how we've mitigated what we're actually not doing. Jane, do you have any comment on the wastewater treatment plant project and the roading procurements?
At this point, I'll just say, do you want to just quickly on the table? So these are quite old processes, the historic processes that they've reviewed. So this time around, Audit across the country have really focused on project management and procurement processes. So they had a really close look at our processes. Following once we received the interim report, I got Matt to just go back and have another look at our processes. We employed Matt, as you know, in a sort of specialist project management role and procurement role. So we haven't had this role on staff before. You've been with us for a year. And Matt is really upskilling on the whole procurement process and stuff. So the world of procurement is moving quite quickly. It's getting a lot more sophisticated, a lot more quickly. And so Matt's now been trained in the most sophisticated modern way of procuring projects. So I've got him to just cast his eye on the report and then the processes. And you're reasonably comfortable, with in terms of what you told me, in terms of that actually they were quite safe processes, so we probably would have dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, but actually nothing, when you were talking to me, nothing in terms of raising any issues. But, that's my question.
So what would be good, Jane, right, in terms of the management response, maybe it needs a bit more detail. After saying, yes, this was done 18 months ago, and we have done A, B, C, D, and E, and M, employing that, right, to actually monitor that, and therefore we believe that our systems have improved, that we actually identified, right, that there is no risk, or these are the residual risks that we've still got, but we're quite happy to accept, because of our size in the organisation, those residual risks. Because what they were looking for was, you'd need forms for Africa in terms of declaration of conflict of interest. Well, sometimes it's pretty obvious that there's going to be a conflict of interest or there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah, so in our world, in a small community, somebody has always worked for somebody else that happens to be part of it. But I mean, that is our reality, but it's a good reasonable pool of people. And I think that was a risk last time, if somebody happened to work for one of the bidders or something.
I mean, just because there's a conflict of interest and you've declared it doesn't mean you can't carry on.
Oh, absolutely, totally agree.
But I think that their point was just as long as you've got some sort of management plan and behind how you're going to behave.
Yes.
And we didn't document all that. I mean, it wasn't talked about at the time. We did document it. So yeah.
And unfortunately, Audit has got the view, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that fair, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it wasn't written down.
Yeah.
Conversations.
I think there is actually some good practice there, right? Which I hope, right? And again, that would be something I think that would be useful just to have that give us assurance that those are actually in place.
Yes, we will do that. The other thing that comes out through some of that review is just the amount of policies that Audit are recommending that we have. And again, we just don't do enough work to justify procurement policy, which we are updating all the time, and just capture some of the things that the Audit's suggesting we have a policy for.
And I actually like, this is my preference, I actually like having a procurement policy for the Audit and Risk Committee, right? Because that's identifying procurement risk. Then underneath that is a procurement manual, and that sits with Jane and her team, because that's actually implementing the policy. Procurement policy should actually saying, in my opinion, should actually say, okay, this is the amount, that we're going to require a one-up, right? This is when we go out for tender, this is when we get 3 quotes, but they're only policy decisions, and when we have an exception to those policies, what is the process for going outside of policy? And that doesn't mean that every time we go outside policy, it needs to come back to the council. There needs to be some delegated authority to actually make sure that's efficient and effective. So that's when you expect that procurement policy to come back, bearing in mind the workload I'm not expecting next week.
We're pretty well through it, actually.
Oh, yes? Oh, okay.
I mean, my preference would be to wait for the new corporate services manager, but hopefully we'll have them on place before the next audit, so we could look at the next audit.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's actually good, just to tick off one. I know there's Audit asking a whole lot of policies, but I think this committee, procurement, maybe treasury, right, are the key key policies of this committee. And if, you know, we just sort of do it on a structured basis, then it doesn't become an overburdening work program. Rebecca.
Yeah, just had a question on that procurement policy. So obviously with like the voting team, we do joint procurement, right? So how do we work that with Audit's expectations for us to follow our procurement policy versus like bringing in South Wairarapis? Do they have a similar policy to us, or are they quite different?
Well, we've got two policies. So we've got the NZTA work, the voting policy, and
So
we've
that's
got
separate then.
the other procurement policy.
Okay. Well,
So
that's
the
easy.
fees should be in line with ours.
Yeah. I mean, we have run into challenges with different policies when we're doing joint procurement. The last one was the procurement. So yeah, that is just something we have to work through, and then if there is a difference in our policies, then we just have to do the negotiation and agree on the approach. With that one, we went to the toughest, most conservative procurement approach.
Are there any other questions? Finally, word management. It's actually only the draft at this stage, isn't it? So it's and it's only the interim, it's not the final as well. So maybe we can actually get some of them knocked off.
Yeah, yes.
Before
That's what we will aim to. And they've signalled clearly which ones, I'll have another look at, so.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Any further discussion? So if we just go to the recommendation, it's up on the screen, can we just, I think we can tweak that, right? I'm very happy we obviously received the report, right? I think we accept in principle the inherent risk around, so concerning the incorrect or the non-review of the rating information database.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I thought you
Yeah, stumbled a bit.
yeah, I know I did, so my apologies. We accept in principle the inherent of the non-independent review of the rating information database, subject to a report from the Chief Executive highlighting what are the inherent risks and how they are being managed. So if I can just explain that. So what we're doing is the inherent risk is the residual, sorry, it's actually could be the residual risk, not inherent risk, the residual risk. So that means the risks that without controls. So these are things that we can't, Audit have asked us to do that we can't do, and that the Chief Executive just report back on how we're managing those residual risks. I'll move that to a seconder. Thank you, Greg. Are you happy with that, Jane? And actually, you can actually put what you're doing, I think, in terms of the management legal response as well. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. The reason I did that was that actually, hopefully, will actually then come off the management legal response.
Then the report is read. A couple of things that I just wanted to highlight for you. Firstly, we're doing some work around our reporting of new visits, and obviously we've got 0 for this period. Optimistically, we're hoping that the work safe protocols we've had in place for COVID, in terms of people being more careful about working are kicking in, but I guess more realistically, we're doing a lot more work to encourage that we're getting back into those, returning to work, getting them back into those routines of actually identifying and reporting our hazards and our near misses particularly. So 2 minor accidents that we have done some work in here and feel happy that those issues are resolved, and it's also giving us an opportunity again to revisit use of PPE and relevant protocols and procedures that need to happen. So Judy's been doing quite a bit of work in here. Just to reflect on the sick leave, you'll see our graph is still a bit unusual, again affected by COVID and that initial quarter for our self-isolating and being cautious around people with bugs. That has come back down in this quarter to those 2017, 2018 levels, and it'll be interesting to see with the protocols we have in place and perhaps a higher, obviously a higher caution around people staying away from work. It'll be interesting to see what our next quarter does look like. Hopeful that we'll actually see a significant reduction in employees and folks that go through our workplace in our team. So it'll be interesting to keep a watch on that as well. And that he just take the question.
Questions, comments?
I was just going to say on the driver behaviour, it's really good to see that we're still tracking well below industry average. So that's like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. Nice to get some, Rebecca.
Not a question, just a comment. That I support your approach to wellbeing. I think that's really cool to see the organisation take that on as a priority, especially around COVID, because I know a lot of people are feeling a lot more anxious about the tunnel for some people. So yeah, please support that.
Yeah.
As I said, it's capably led by our CE. You know, again, I think we talked about last time, but the personal emails, particularly, that people have found really comforting and reassuring from Jane. So yeah, we absolutely appreciate what she's doing above and beyond, you know, perhaps setting leaders in their organisation.
Yeah, no, I know that it keeps it real, very real.
I actually also like it was setting up online payment portals as well. Just keeping up with the times.
And particularly around preparation for a level 3 to get basic school. So that was making things a bit easier for us.
Thank you. Sorry? Yeah, quickly. Hey, you can pad on your phone now if you like. It's interesting that the Inland Revenue Department aren't accepting any totally online, just causing a little bit of grief for some sectors of the community.
Well, the older population, my dad doesn't do online payments because he doesn't trust that, and he's that generation. He writes checks out.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it seems foreign, but yeah, just I'm pleased because my biggest concern is the fact that, you know, the lack of reporting of near misses and minor misses, and I'm pleased you've raised that because that's it's always a worry when you don't actually get any near misses. Sure, there are.
There's always a near miss.
Yeah, and the bit that really worries me, sounds probably the stock record now, is that to me is, look, if you've had a near miss and you didn't record it, but then that near miss turns into an actual event and health and safety come back and have a look and say, well, you clearly should have known about it and you didn't do anything about it. That's where you go, be in the gun big time. And not only that, you've actually got an event that's actually hurt someone, which goes in as our objectives as well. Yeah. All right. So, do we have any further discussion? Do we have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Rebecca. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Last but not least. Save the best till last, do we?
As always.
As always?
Sure. Risk register update, just a couple of the changes, the trial probationary periods, the contracts. Identified a risk around water services bill, it's being based on that, but noted may change. Also noted in there, but it's not. It's deal without being a risk stage.
Inherently uncertain.
Uncertain.
And I think that risk might, I wouldn't say crystallised, but might become more the time.
Risk.
It might go either way. Yeah, the risk might be further defined. It might be further defined. I'm not sure of the time frame on them.
But there's something to keep an eye on.
Oh,
On the risk register.
yeah, I don't know how you would actually put it on the risk register, because I could actually write at the moment, with the uncertainty of risk around the Three Waters review, that would actually fill this table.
Just certainly from a governance point of view, we want to be informed as much as we can. And I think that's a good way that we as governments can help the process.
We all know when we know.
Yeah.
Certainly we've hit the ground running, we've attended the workshops and good numbers, and I think getting a bit as good a head around as we can at this stage.
I would suggest that the water services bill, that I can't imagine it's going to go through incidents, but it's there.
I mean, there's a whole lot of,
Did I have to go under the bridge?
Oh, I was going to say that I've used that before in a similar form.
Go to the farm?
There's a risk of actually, yeah, those comments. Just a quick question. Any questions on the risks? Rebecca?
Sorry, just wanted a bit of clarification around under the possible cause you've written
On which
one? Sorry, this page 73 under the water services bill. And whether reading placing business directly on council officers.
Yes, yes.
So have you put that, like, is that the main risk that you're seeing? Because in your report you noted that we may lose key employees to a regulator if they want to progress their career. Because it's my understanding that even if there was a regional body that looked after assets, they would still have those same liabilities as if they were looking for council. Is that, yeah?
Yes, so that's why I don't know whether the bill will go through as is. I'd be surprised if the strict liability goes through. It's my personal take on it, but it still remains it's there as a potential. So why would you undertake a role in the water services if you can find a similar environment, like similar remuneration, but without a jail sentence?
May or may not have directly.
That's strict liability.
Yes, yes.
So, no, I've got to do it.
So that makes sense, thank you.
Question, why Hardy regular? Now we've joined LGFA, right? Gee, it's still yellow.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, my bad. It's the last one, item 30. Right, so 30, not still the last. Page 81. Yes. Without being LGFA, that might have moved down and stuff. While we hadn't joined LGFA, there's a higher risk, but now we've joined LGFA and we will sign.
Yes, you're probably right. I think the BBGF and didn't have a look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Previous
hadn't been, I remember we had actually done all paperwork.
Paperwork, I think, yeah.
Change it.
They can go green because with LGFA, even, it was interesting, I actually attended an LGFA funding shareholders day at Gatecrest a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And they talked about extensively the work they did behind the scenes when COVID hit, because I'm not sure if people are aware, but when COVID hit, liquidity dried up immediately. And what LGFA did, they talked to Treasury and the Reserve Bank and got, I can't remember who, right, but someone to actually then go and buy, because then there's the same problem that the government was having with liquidity. So the Reserve Bank was buying government stock to increase liquidity. As part of that announcement, they also bought local government funding agency bonds as well, which actually then increased the liquidity because they saw some confidence, the investors saw the confidence in the market and lowered the interest rates, which actually was actually a very, very good result, which was a significant change to what happened in 2008 with GFC. Liquidity again dried up and some councils weren't able to borrow money. Well, they were, but they had to pay a higher price. If you're a member of LGFA, then you're protected by the actions of LGFA. So that actually reduced the risk dramatically for funding for those local authorities who are members of LGFA. So it's a good news result that we got there in time. Any further questions on the risk register update? We want to make sure Dave ends his trade today. Yeah, it's not allowed those. All right, in that case, can we have a, sorry? I will talk about liquidity before, but yes. I'll move that we receive the report. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rebecca. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against. Carried. Thank you very much for your. Thank you, Karakia. Thank you. Rob, thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tō koutou mahi, i te rau nei. He karakia whakamutunga. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atākura, he hio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we want to